All right, everybody, I'm going to go ahead and call the Transportation and Public Safety Budget Committee meeting to order. It's my understanding that the new director of CPost has some commitments that he needs to get on the road for, so we're going to switch the agenda up a little bit and get the budget presentation for CPost first and get it out of the way. So if you'll go ahead and start with the overview, Merle.
Absolutely. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, good afternoon. Also joining me today here is the new executive, Doug Schroeder, from the Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training, and he'll be following me. But I would just draw your attention to the budget analysis with the name Kansas Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training at the top, the orange public safety band. Looking on page 1, just a general reminder of what CPost is. Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training, or CPost, is located in Wichita. It is a regulatory body that provides the citizens of Kansas with qualified, trained, and professional peace officers. They do this regulation function through 2 ways. Primarily, they maintain a central registry of law enforcement officer demographics, qualifications, and employment history. And that information is made available to law enforcement agencies as they go through the hiring process or the appointment of law enforcement officers. Information is made available to those agencies. CPost also conducts administrative investigations related to violations of the Kansas Law Enforcement Act, and that can result in suspension, revocation, or denial of certification of law enforcement officers in Kansas. And by statute, law enforcement officers in Kansas must be licensed. If we move on to, I would draw your attention to page 4. You'll see some boxes indicating a couple of funds. The CPost is primarily supported through 2 special revenue funds. They do not rely on state general funds, but exclusively special revenue funds. Item 1 is the Kansas Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training Fund. This draws revenue from docket fees on municipal court filings. Typically, there is a sum of $22.50 that is assessed on each case, and from that $22.50, $5 from that docket fee goes to support the commission to support CPost. An additional $1 from each one of those filings goes to the next fund, which is the Local Law Enforcement Training Reimbursement Fund. That is a fund that is exclusively used to reimburse municipalities for sending law enforcement officers to local training academies. So by statute, the agency cannot use that fund for operational purposes, and they rely primarily on that Kansas Peace Officer Standards and Training Fund. And you will note the agency has expressed some concern. Some revenue from those docket filing fees are slowly shrinking. That's partially related to decreases in those case filings that have happened related to the pandemic. And there is even some indication, even prior to the pandemic, that those filings for traffic violation movements are slowly decreasing. So the agency has expressed some concern, and the executive director may go into detail, but generally they feel stable for at least the next 2 budget years. Looking on page 5, I will review the FY22 budget analysis. On the agency estimate, the agency estimates a revised FY22 expenditure of $917,379, all from those special revenue funds, which is an increase of $44,563 above the FY22 approved amount. So some of the adjustments that result in that change. Item number 2 is the filling of a vacant position and overlap. The agency converted a part-time investigator position to a full-time position in FY22, which resulted in increased salaries and wages expenditures of $22,000. Additionally, there was 2-month period of overlap between the previous executive director and the start of the new executive director to allow for essentially cross-training between executive directors. Item 2 is the agency's supplemental request for FY22. This relates to a vehicle. The agency requests $25,000 for the purchase of a mid-size SUV that would be used for employee travel and to transport records and evidence. And that new vehicle would replace an existing vehicle. In short, the agency has a fleet of 3 vehicles that are all approaching the end of their lifespan. You'll see an enhancement request this year to replace 1 vehicle, and in FY23 you'll see another enhancement request to replace a second vehicle. Item 4, Municipality Aid. The agency has, as I mentioned, they have a local law enforcement training reimbursement fund that is passed through to municipalities for expenses associated with training law enforcement officers at local training academies. Expenditures from this fund decreased by $21,845 below the FY22 approved amount, primarily due to decreased revenue to those funds. Then we look at the bottom of the page for the governor's recommendation. Governor concurs with the agency's revised estimate for FY22 and does not recommend any changes. Mr. Chairman, that concludes FY22. I can stand for questions or proceed to FY23.
Questions? Let's go ahead and proceed.
All right, looking on FY23, on page 7, you'll see at the top a box that lists some of the adjustments, including enhancements. Agency requests $889,326, all from those special revenue funds for FY23. This is an all funds decrease of $28,053 below the FY22 revised estimate. So some of the adjustments involved is item 1, an enhancement for a vehicle purchase. Agency requests $25,000 for the replacement of an additional vehicle in FY23. So that's, as I mentioned, you'll see there was a supplemental request in 22, and this is the enhancement request in 23. Item number 2 is computer software maintenance. The agency increased expenditures by $6,155 in FY23 due to increased database server space required to support the central registry. Because there's a lot of technology involved in maintaining that registry and in storing investigative data and software to collect investigative data, technology expenses are significant for this agency. So you'll see in FY22 for some of the software maintenance that, as I mentioned, that expenditure increased. Item 3, computer equipment. The agency is requesting to purchase computer equipment in FY22, which will eliminate laptop rental fees and provide for $17,064 decrease for FY23 expenditure. Essentially, there's expenditures that occur in FY22 that will not reoccur in FY23. Item 4 is attorney fee. The expenditures increased by $4,000 in FY22 for the consultation of a subject matter expert for legal questions arising from federal law. During the investigative and administrative hearings that the agency conducts, they do work with the Attorney General to provide legal consultation. So some of these fees are associated with an expectation that there may be increases in those hearings and further needs for legal consultation. And then you'll see all other adjustments. There's a decrease in expenditures from FY22 to FY23 in the amount of $21,000, primarily due to the overlap of executive directors that occurred in 22 but will not occur in 23. Governor's recommendation: the governor concurs with the agency's request for FY23 and recommends no changes. Moving on to, finally, I'll hit on page 10. You can see a trend of their expenditures from their in the administrative program, which is their only program within the agency. And the box towards the bottom also lists some of the performance measures for the agency. And Mr. Chairman, that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to stand for questions.
Any questions? Representative Delperdang.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Resman was late to the meeting, and he wants you to just go do the whole thing over again. Maybe you could meet with him privately.
Yeah, happy to do that.
Go ahead, Representative Delperdang. My sense of humor is lacking. I'm the only one that thinks I'm funny.
Can we take his request up for a vote?
That's in order.
There you go. Page 7, it was 2023, where you got into item number 3, computer equipment, where you're going to purchase instead of lease. What's the current annual lease that we're into? And then the second question, which I don't know if you can answer or not, but what will be the long-term effects of purchasing the equipment versus leasing, where you do maybe every 3 years it's upgraded and kept current? And you, like I say, you may not have an answer on that one.
Yeah, I would, Mr. Chairman, Representative, I'd have to investigate, because I think there may be multiple leases involved in that, and some of that may also be agreements. I think they receive some consultation from the Office of Information Technologies, but because they are located in Wichita, I think they often have to strike separate lease agreements for some of these laptops, so I would have to investigate some of those details.
Because to me, it's a missing piece of the pie. I don't know how much the lease is to go ahead and spend $17,000 to just purchase new. You know, if the lease is $1,000 a year, which I know it's not, but I'd like to have something to compare it to.
Yeah, let's make sure we ask Doug that when he gets
Yeah.
up here.
Thank you.
He can do some of the research for us, too.
Yeah, to clarify, that would be, in FY23, that would be a decrease of 17,000 because they essentially have expenditures for some of those services in 22 and don't have those in 23. But your question is still relevant, like what are some of the leases?
Other questions? Okay, all right. Thank you very much, Merle. Doug, welcome to the committee.
Thank you very much, Chair Francis and committee members. Thank you for having me here today. And before I answer that question, let me just tell you a little bit more about the Kansas Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training. We are devoted to advancing law enforcement profession. The Commission adopts and enforces regulations that are necessary to ensure the law enforcement officers are adequately trained, certified, as well as investigate lapses of integrity and revoke certification when necessary. Post is funded solely by docket fees collected by municipal courts. Future financial concerns include our unreliable and aging fleet of vehicles, cybersecurity concerns, physical office security concerns, and meeting stakeholders' requests for our central registry capabilities. Docket fees have been declining for the past 5 years. Currently, we would not ask for any increase in docket fees as we feel that both fiscal year 22 and 23 should remain adequate. However, if that trend continues, we may have to revisit that. Now, to answer your question, our lease for the equipment is a 3-year lease, and we are 3.5 years into that lease, meaning that it should be terminated by both sides at any point. The lease is approximately $300 a month. If math serves me correct, that's about $3,600 per year. It covers 11 machines and all upgrades and maintenance with those machines. We did a breakdown, not having that in front of me, but we think in about 4 years' time, we will be able to far exceed that lease if we do a purchase program.
Okay. Again, are there plans moving forward? I've got no problem with that part, but is there plans moving forward so that 3 or 4 years out, we are looking at maybe replacing it, and then which is more economical, leasing versus the purchasing is kind of what I was getting at.
Yeah, so I was advised in working with our accountant that the lease would not be an advantageous as a outright purchase in this circumstance. Now, as far as future planning, that's something that I think that we do internally through capital improvements and just kind of earmark 3 or 4 years from now being able to come back and do that again. And I will stand for any questions.
So just so I understand, you were in a lease and you purchased, or you are in a lease and you plan on purchasing?
That's correct, the latter.
And you plan on purchasing in about 3 years? Or when do you plan to?
As soon as possible. Right now, the lease doesn't allow for any upgrades. So we have the same machines that are currently, 3.5 years into a 3-year lease.
Okay, so you've got the same machines, you're 3.5 years into a 3-year lease. So you're going to buy this year in fiscal year 2022?
Yes.
And you're going to purchase for $17,000?
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions? Oh, yeah, go ahead. We'll let the ranking minority
Thank you,
member
Mr.
go
Chairman.
first.
I just have a question under the performance measures, number 2, the percentage of officers certified per provisional license. It looks like in fiscal year 20, it was 86.2%, dropped down to 76.8 in 21. Then I see a target of 82% for '22, but it drops down to 77 in fiscal year '23. And I wonder if you might address the reasons behind that and what's happening?
Yes,
Thank
certainly
you.
will. So the biggest reason for that decline between 20 and 21, and our hopeful outlook beyond that, is law enforcement agencies' inability to recruit and retrain officers. I'm sure you've heard that from other state departments, local and county. A lot of agencies are trying to hire, but are not finding the right people to hire. A provisional license is something given to the officer as soon as they are hired. With that provisional license, they have 1 year to attend a basic training academy. So that number really represents the number of new officers coming into the law enforcement profession.
Follow up. So it has more to do with the applicants that are applying, that their ability to achieve the full license is lower.
I would say their ability to meet the standards of the hiring agency.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Representative Resman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You mentioned about docket fees were going down. Is that a result of COVID?
I think that's a big part of it. However, we've noticed this decline since before COVID started. And I've been trying to investigate further why that might be. I've been working with the League of, I was going in the wrong direction, Court Management Liaison and their president. They aren't quite sure if it's just less tickets, less municipal revenue. Again, this is only municipal courts. It doesn't include district courts. And so it's a possibility that there's less misdemeanor crime and greater number of felony crime that would go to the district court. But there are several moving parts. I think COVID is one of them.
Other questions, Representative Delperdang?
Thank you, Chairman. If I could just make a general comment, but I had the privilege of speaking at Yoder for Gary Steed's retirement party, so I just wanted to say welcome aboard and look forward to working with you. So,
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Other questions? So just going back a little bit on that provisional licensing, you see across all levels of law enforcement less applicants. Is it tied to something culturally in our society, or is it tied to pay, or do you have any idea?
I think it's a little bit of all of that. So this summer, we prepared for a presentation, and in doing so, we ran the numbers on how many certified officers there are in Kansas. There was 8,600. Towards fall, we wanted to update our stats for another presentation. There was 8,300. So in a couple months' time, the state of Kansas lost 300 police officers. We're going to try and start tracking this more, but I think it is a result of perhaps the culture not looking at law enforcement as a respectable profession as maybe it used to have been held within public. And I think that is upon us to continue to build that trust and build those bridges to fix that. Pay also is an issue. I know you're talking to several agencies, and I hear from my colleagues, the chiefs and sheriffs from across the state, that they're all in a bidding war. I mean, we've seen, I never saw it 5 years ago, I never thought I would see a law enforcement agency give a hiring bonus, and now many are. So I think there are a lot of moving parts, but I hope I answered your question, sir.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that we see across the board. When you do your licensing and everything, does it apply to all levels of law enforcement? Like, for instance, are the KBI investigators part of your registry, the highway patrol?
So yes, state, local, county, and municipal.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much. Good job, good first run.
Thank you.
Okay. Next on the agenda, we will have an overview by Merle Riedel of the KBI. Oh, excuse me, we're going to have Sharday Kane, excuse me, give us an overview of the KBI budget. Welcome to the committee, Sharday.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I think it's on, it's blue, so. I'm going to start on page 6, which is where the bulk of the changes are with fiscal year 2022. The legislature approved $39.3 million, including $27.0 million SGF. There was a reappropriation of $1.1 million all SGF for a beginning starting point of $40.6 million, including $28.1 million SGF. The agency requests a revised estimate of $41.5 million, including $28.1 million SGF in fiscal year 2022. This is an all funds increase of $1.1 million and an SGF decrease of $2,851. The agency estimate includes the following adjustments: coronavirus emergency supplemental funding, that's about $369,000 for necessary supplies and PPE. E-citation national priority safety, so about $325,000 for the records manager position, and the e-citation machine system helps with electronically searching for investigative purposes. The National Criminal History Improvement Project is a federal program that helps with this technical assistance to states and localities to improve the quality, timeliness, and immediate accessibility of criminal history records and related information. And there is an increase of about $355,000 for that. All of the other adjustments are related to the Paul Corvidale Forensic Sciences Improvement Grant and Law Enforcement Victims Advocate Federal Assistance Program. That $2,851 SGF decrease is related to the capers from Senate Bill 159, last year's budget bill. The governor recommends $41.5 million, including $28.1 million. Essentially, she concurred with the agency's revised estimate in fiscal year 2022. And I'm happy to stand for questions or move on to 2023.
Any questions on this portion of the budget? Okay, continue.
Fiscal year 2023 analysis can be found on page 9. The agency requests $40.2 million, including $27.9 million SGF for fiscal year 2023. This is a decrease of $1.2 million below the fiscal year 2022 revised estimate. The first 3 changes are related to the increases that were requested for 2022, so about $369,000 decrease in the PPE. National Criminal History Improvement Program has a decrease of about $418,000 and a decrease of $303,000 for the e-citation system. On the top of page 10, the agency requested 3 enhancements. The first being the Forensic Scientist Recruitment and Retention Initiative. That one is $947,000. The Professional Staff Recruitment and Retention Initiative, so application developers, administrative assistants, and so forth, in the amount of $1.1 million, and the KBI Commissioned Personnel Recruitment in the form of $918,000, and that's your special agents. I know that Director Thompson spoke with you about that, and he's also here to answer any additional questions you may have. On page 10, number 7, reinstatement of the base budget. The agency requests an enhancement of $1.1 million SGF for fiscal year 2023 to restore the agency's base budget amount. As you may remember, the reduced resource package was about 10% requested. The governor instead recommended a reduction of 4.5%, equaling $1.1 million. So they are asking for that to be restored in their budget. There is shrinkage included in this agency's request based on the vacancies that they have currently and that they estimate will continue. And lastly, the other adjustments include salaries and wages, specifically for police and firemen, retirement and group health hospitalization insurance, totaling about $785,000. The governor's recommendation for fiscal year 2023 can be found on page 11. The governor did recommend reinstatement of the base budget for the 10% for the agency's revised estimate and their request. The Governor also recommended a shift of about $944,000 from the Kansas Criminal Justice Information System Fund to the SGF. This is primarily attributable to the elimination of a transfer into the Criminal Justice Information System Line Fund from the Division of Vehicles Modernization Surcharge. And the last three are that the governor does not recommend adoption of the agency's 3 enhancement requests. I'm happy to stand for questions.
Okay, thank you. Very good job. Now we'll hear from Director Thompson. Welcome to the committee. It doesn't seem like it's been that long since you were here.
Well, thank you for the invitation back. Just for the record, my name is Kirk Thompson. I do serve as the director of the Kansas Bureau of Investigation, and I really appreciate the opportunity to come back and speak with you. Specifically, I'm going to focus on our enhancement requests, and then, of course, any questions that you may have about our budget. Before I get into our requests, I think it's important that we bring back to you success stories, if you will, information about things that we've been able to accomplish, that you have funded in the past. Probably the principal thing that I wanted to bring you up to speed on was the acquisition of new automated biometric identification system technology. Originally, that looked to be about an $8 million item, and we were able to get that down to about $6.9 million, which the legislature funded. So that is, a contract has been issued, and that is in process. It's going to be about a 2-year project to bring that online, but we expect it to be operational in 2023. So that is a key component in the whole Kansas Criminal Justice Information Network. Without that, basically we fail. So we really appreciate the support from this committee and the legislature and everyone to get the funding that was necessary to bring that online. The second thing that I wanted to bring to your attention was over the past couple of years, there's been a lot of discussion about police use of force and a lot of discussion about the culture of law enforcement and those kinds of things. And so in speaking with the Attorney General, we decided that one of the things that we could do to be helpful here was to start tracking use of force incidents within the state of Kansas. And so the Attorney General asked us to develop a project to do that. That took place over the past year. That actually went live February 1 of this year, and we are now starting to collect use of force data from our local law enforcement and state partners. What that will do is provide information about all levels of force that are used by law enforcement agencies across the state. Certain levels of force are of interest to the to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and this system will scrape that data away from the Kansas system, pass it on to the FBI, and it will eliminate the need for local agencies to participate in 2 systems. A planned future enhancement that actually is already in progress, but we're going to make an interface for those larger agencies who collect the data already within their own records management systems, and then that interface, they'll just make one entry into their own systems. We'll pull the data from that interface, scrape the data off that's needed to go to the FBI, very similar to what we do with the national, the Incident-Based Reporting System, or NIBRS. So this particular program will be a part of the newly developed Kansas Incident-Based Reporting System, which will probably go online in about 2 to 3 years. It's a very large project, and this happens to be the first component or the first module for that system. So I think those are two important steps forward that we've made, and I just wanted to bring you guys up to speed on those two issues. Now, on the negative side, states had really a marked increase in crime. Last year, we went up 9.3%, and that in 2020, the violent crime rate was 24.4% above the 10-year average. That is very significant because for the last 2 decades, we've been seeing crime rates going down. Now, all of a sudden, the last 3 years, we've started seeing them pop up again. The murder rate between 2019 and 2020 was 48.5% higher. And in fact, in 2020, we had the most murders recorded in Kansas since records were started being kept in 1959. So significant violent crime increases. So in addition to just the general nature of violent crime, we've seen all kinds of increased threats across the spectrum that we work in, whether it be cybercrime, human trafficking, transnational crime, child victim crime, public corruption, just all of the areas in which we spend time and that we work, we're seeing additional events occurring. I know one of the questions that probably everybody has, including me, is why that's happening. And I can't give you a definitive answer. There's so many variables that nobody has really been able to say why crime is rising like it is. But we're seeing that in multiple states and in most large municipalities across our country. So, good news for Kansas is our violent crime rate inched down a little bit, and our homicide rate went down for this last year on record. So we're hoping we've reversed that trend, but after 3 strong years of increases, we just aren't sure. So with that, let me kind of remind everyone that the KBI is more than just one agency. Our role is kind of to provide economy of scale for smaller local departments who do not have the resources, whether it be personnel, whether it be equipment, whether it be time. Our role is to come in and to assist. Primarily, we work in the smaller to medium-sized jurisdictions across the state. So I want to get that out there because I want to make sure everybody sees that an investment in the KBI is not just an investment in one agency, it's an investment in the public safety community in this state as a whole. So let's turn to the budget now. And back in 2023, to the 2023 budget, back when COVID started, there was a lot of uncertainty. Nobody really knew where things were going to go. And out of an abundance of caution, we decided to try to just kind of sit tight. We made no enhancement requests. We just felt that there was going to be a significant fiscal hit from COVID and the like. So during that same period of time, we received a budget allotment of 10%. We appealed. It went down to 4.5%, which ended up being about $1.01 million. And one of our first enhancement requests for this year was to have that amount reinstated. We appealed that to the governor's office and we were successful, and as you heard, that is now back into our base budget. That's extremely important because we were seeing huge changes in our expenses, especially in the forensic laboratory setting. Number one, everybody wanted forensic scientists because of COVID-related issues, and then our typical equipment, some of our personal protective equipment, the prices just really went up. Throw in higher energy bills, all of those things, we were struggling a bit there. So getting back to base budget was very important for us. So step one, I would ask for your support of the governor's recommendation returning us to base budget. So there was a lot of evaluation and discussion within our agency about where we went next. And there are several things that we need to improve upon, that we need to do as far as addressing some of these criminal threats. However, we have been unable to hire. I think Doug from CPost related to that it's been difficult across every spectrum, but particularly in the law enforcement spectrum. So for us to actually move forward, we have got to solve the problem and be able to hire the vacancies, the positions that we currently have, that are currently funding. So to address those recruiting and retention issues across the agency, we submitted 3 separate enhancement requests. The first request dealt with our sworn staff, which are our investigators, our special agents. The second was for our forensic scientists and those who work in our Forensic Science Center and other laboratories. And then the third was to address our professional staff. And I think you normally see from us and others maybe one request or for one particular aspect of the agency. What we see is that we offer this unique suite of law enforcement or public safety services that all kind of work together to promote public safety. You know, all of our repositories and all of our IT services serve every law enforcement agency out there, every court, every prosecutor's office. Without that, it makes all of our work much, much more difficult. Forensic science services, other than just in Wichita and in Johnson County, we provide those services for all law enforcement and prosecutorial agencies. Without being able to process evidence and put experts on the stand to testify in our criminal courts, the system really stalls out. And then, of course, we've talked a little bit about the investigative capacity that we have to bring resources, equipment, training to local law enforcement agencies to support major cases that they may encounter during the year. So we felt it was important to bring forth three separate enhancements that deal with those 3 groups of individuals, because they all work together, and fixing one piece doesn't really help the whole organization move forward. So that was a basic rationale there. So step 1, we'll talk a little bit about the enhancement package for sworn personnel. And the last time that I talked with you, I was not able to give you wasn't able to give you very specific information about what that looked like. And as I mentioned, we were in the process of having conversations with the Division of Budget and having conversations with Department of Administration on trying to find a solution to this problem. And so those were ongoing at that time, and they're still ongoing, but we have come to a proposal that I'd like to lay out for you today. So let's start. This first one for the enhancement of sworn salary or sworn staff salary is about $1.7 million. And let's talk a little bit to kind of give you a sense of what a KBI agent is. That's an individual who generally has 6 years of enforcement experience, hopefully several of those years as investigative experience. Because when a local agency calls for help, they don't need just another body. They need somebody who's been there, done that, and has the experience to do the job that they need. So we found that over the past 6 years, less than 10% of our applicants in each class that we had met those preferred requirements. And so that's kind of significant for us. So we did an internal market study looking at both other state agencies similarly situated, like the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation, the Nebraska State Patrol Investigations Bureau, and we spread out a little bit, went down to Texas, went up to South Dakota, North Dakota, some of the similar states, and we found that we were at the kind of the low end of the scale. And I think I presented some of that information to you last time about where we actually sat. And that was about $9,000 below what everyone, the average of what others were being paid. So then we looked at what we believe is extremely important, the salaries of local law enforcement agencies in Kansas. And unfortunately, Doug is right, there's kind of a bidding war out there, and we are looking for personnel from local law enforcement agencies that meet those criteria. Those are the type of individuals we need to do the work that we are taxed to do. So when we look at those salaries, we're at the bottom of the scale of major cities, sheriff's offices, where we would recruit in this state. So we're about $12,000 lower. So the first thing I would say is in our work with the Division of Budget and Department of Administration, they provided information that they had from different salary studies. And I think we've come together with a proposal that would work. It's not final by any stretch, but it's one that I want to throw out there to you. So if I could get you to look at Figure 1 in the testimony, it pretty well sets out where we currently are in the range of other state investigative agencies. And if we go with the proposed salary adjustment package, where we will be. And hopefully you can see that we're not asking for the moon. This enhancement request would put us right in the middle of our other state counterparts as far as starting pay.
And this is the one you're in agreement with the Department of Administration? They agree with this number?
I don't want to say that, speak for another,
Okay.
but we have tried to work very closely, and I think we are okay, and Director Profit is present today. If you have specific questions, yeah, I would rather that we ask him. I don't want to speak for someone else.
What percentage of your your commission personnel are vacant currently? In other words, do you have a 5% vacancy or a 15% vacancy?
We are at, right now, we are at 88% full. So that would be about a 12% vacancy rate. So let me ask you to then move to the next chart, which is the starting investigator pay. And that will show that in comparison to the places where we are recruiting from, Wichita, Riley County, Topeka, Lenexa, Johnson County, Lawrence, KCK, those are the bigger departments we have better luck at we want to have better luck at recruiting. You can see that we're at the bottom, and this proposed will put us in the middle again.
I think Representative Resman has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is the starting. Will this cause any kind of compression?
No. And let me explain that. Several years ago, I think it was 2016, with support of the legislature and the support of the Department of Administration, we created a pay plan for our organization. And that pay plan allowed for movement in specific, you saw, okay. But bottom line is that pay plan under what we are proposing would be adjusted across the board, and it would not result in any significant compression. The pay plan that we're proposing is lower for command level personnel, about half of the salary increase as with the field personnel. But we are comfortable with that, and we're comfortable with that request. Yeah, the idea in working with the Department of Administration was to focus on the area where our trouble was, and our trouble is bringing sworn personnel in the door. So what we're proposing is a 16% increase up front, and then after a year, and that's about the time that it takes for training and getting through the probationary period, then they would move up an additional 2.5%. So there would be kind of a front loading of a significant amount to try to say, so-and-so from wherever you're working, come to work for us because we'll pay you this much to begin. You make it through the training period. You'll then move to this position, and then based upon our salary progression scale, they'll be able to look and see where they will end up basically through the rest of their career. And that's a very important piece of recruiting because most other agencies have similar scales, and they can look and say, well, if I stay at my current place, I'm going to be at this range when I'm 5 years in. Where will I be if I come to work for you? This has allowed us to answer those questions, and these increases, I think, will be very helpful in drawing personnel into our agency.
So your new program changes these step progressions from the old one? Okay. And how do they, so on the new one, they get a step at 1 year?
Yes.
And then what do they get?
Then there's a 2.5% step at the end of the first year, after they complete their training.
Right. What are the steps after that point?
They are 5% every 3 to 2 years alternating. That's the way the plan is set up. One step will be after 3 years, then the next step will be after 2 years, then the next step will be after 3 years.
But each step is 5% instead of the 2.5% in the standard state of Kansas pay plan.
Correct. Let me try to, if you look at the addendums, you'll see what the proposed plan is. And for example, I'm gonna wish I would have brought my reading glasses to look at this. The first step would, let me slow down and try to explain this progression a little bit. But the current pay plan starts at range 32, step 4. That's where our agents currently start. Under the new proposal, that would move to range 35, step 4, which is approximately a 15.7% increase for that first year. Then after the first year, there would be a movement to step 5, which is a 2.5% increase. And that would be to the 18% level, a little over 18% level. From that point forward, there would be, for example, after two additional years, there would be a two-step movement. Then after 3 additional years, there would be a two-step movement. That's how the progression plan is set up, and it's very similar to the current one that you may have, that you're looking at from our prior testimony. Okay, if I'd like to move forward then into the forensic laboratory. The forensic laboratory staff, I know in this committee we've talked before about how marketable they are, and where our difficulty is with our forensic scientists is not so much getting them in the door, but once they are fully trained, court qualified, keeping them. So what our proposal for a forensic scientist is a small increase in that first 2 years of them working for us, and that's when they're going through the training program. Then they move to what's called a Forensic Scientist 2. The Forensic Scientist 2 is the journeyman scientist. They do most of the bench work on routine cases. And then after about 5 years, or when they reach certain levels of experience and certifications, they move to a Forensic Scientist 3. And that's really the most important level in the laboratory. They're the ones that do all the big cases. They're the ones that handle very specific additional responsibilities and requirements for the agencies. They kind of become the research branch, if you will, and validate new technologies and new analysis that we bring on board. So the particular package that we're proposing is around $950,000. And that will involve about 95 employees of the Forensic Laboratory Program. Each of these increases will be different depending on what kind of qualifications each scientist has. So I can't say it's a flat X percentage per individual, but if you look at the total amount of money versus the number of people impacted, it will average out about 11% as an increase across the entire spectrum in the laboratory. So if you could look toward addendum number 2. There are several charts that kind of demonstrate the starting salary differences and the top salary differences for the 3 main classifications within the laboratory. So the first one is the trainee, the FS1. Then the next page goes to the FS2, which is the trained kind of workhorse of the laboratory. And so in these particular charts, you can see where they are currently and where they would end up under our proposed plan. And again, I think you can see that we start low to middle, and we are finishing in the middle or on the high side of the middle range of each one of these classifications. And I won't go through each and every one of those. Hopefully those charts are clear.
Just, do you have vacancy, position vacancy data for the individual levels 1, 2, and 3?
I do. I hope I can lay my hands on it, right?
Is it in here and I just can't find it?
No,
That could
no,
be.
it was a question I thought you may ask, so I brought the data. Right now, in our agency, we require each division to prepare a quarterly report, and so we aren't always constantly searching for data. So I'm looking at the last quarterly report that we had. So at the end of the last quarter, we had 4 forensic scientists, 1 vacancies. We had 1 forensic scientist, 2 vacancy, and we had 5 forensic scientists, 3 vacancies, and 1 forensic scientist, 4 vacancy, which is a supervisory position. So we had a total of 11 forensic science positions vacant.
And how many ones are there roughly? If,
There are 14 authorized. There are 16 authorized at the 2 level and 42 authorized at the 3 level.
how many at the 3 level, I'm sorry?
42.
So you got a lot of vacancies at the 1 level, not very many at the 2 level, around the 10%, 11% vacancy at the 3 level. How many are authorized at the 4 level? Is there only one of those?
There's only 1 vacancy at the 4 level.
How many authorized?
Authorized 9.
9. If I remember correctly from your testimony last time, it seemed like to me, being naive like I am, that there was a pretty clear progression, an easy progression, if you hit your marks, to go from 1 to 2. To go make the jump from 2 to 3 was pretty tough. Is that kind of the way I remember it? Or am I remembering it somewhat correctly?
Yes. And if you look a little further back in addendum number 3, you'll see the actual pay plan, if you will. And so everybody in that band has got to have a bachelor's degree. They've got to have certain training and competency, testing requirements in at least 1 discipline. There's certain skills, knowledge, and ability, check boxes, if you will. And they need to be providing training to organizations. They need to publish research, those kind of higher level kinds of responsibilities for them to get into the FS3 pay band.
Right, but to go from 1 to 2 is one's basically a trainee, and you put in your time, and if you guys are happy with him, he moves to 2 without a lot of additional training, and other than what?
They get work authorization in
Yeah.
that FS1 range, then they'll stay in the 2 range until they meet the higher responsibilities of the 3 range.
Any other questions? Okay. Who? Oh, Representative Poskin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just looking at the addendum for the Forensic Sciences 2 trained. Are those transposed, the KBI proposed and KBI current? Because it looks like the proposed is lower. Right. They might just be transposed.
Yeah, I did not pick up on that. I apologize for giving you bad
I just wanted to make
information.
sure that I was looking at that right.
They're very close, but I apologize. Good eye for that.
Totally fine, thank you.
If that's the only mistake you've made this week, you're batting 1,000 in my book.
I can tell you it's not.
Do you have a question, Representative Delperdang?
Thank you. I can't let Mr. Thompson get out without at least asking him a few things, so. Just going through this, the addendum 2, so forth, that refers back to the enhancement, the $947,050, right? Which is also shows up on page 10 of the overall budget, the same number, okay. But then that's scientist recruitment. Again, the governor did not recommend that. So we're essentially trying to override what the governor's recommendation is on this.
Yes, and I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say that my hope in working with the governor's office and the Department of Administration and Division of Budget is that we'll reach an agreement on moving us forward. And what I'm going to ask you at the end here is to support whatever final proposal may come from this, or in the alternative, if you would consider moving our request forward into omnibus so that we can continue work, if you will, and you would be able to take a look at any revisions, et cetera, at omnibus.
And then, of the items, it looked like there was 3 that were turned down. Is that the one you're saying that's my most important, or are we also going to go after some others also?
There's 3 that
There's
were
3.
turned down.
Yeah.
The first one is the sworn agent pay plan adjustment. The second is the forensic science pay plan adjustment. And then the third is a pay plan adjustment for all of our professional staff.
And then just to turn the clock back, I think the first time I sat on this committee was in 2017, and I remember talking to you back then specific to the forensic scientist and the problems you've had with the turnover. You know, my memory is it's probably roughly $200,000 in training that they receive over a period of time. They get that, now they're more valuable and they head on. That's the turnover. So has that subsided with what we've helped? Has it gotten worse? I mean, it comes to a point where I'm thinking, what do we need to do to fix this?
There's no easy answer to that, because I do an exit interview with everybody that leaves our organization, trying to understand how they made their choices and why they made their choices. In the forensic science community, most of the time it deals with money. Now, when you guys authorized us to build the new laboratory facility, as you may remember, we used to have our laboratory in the basement of a 1929 school. And when we put our employees in a professional work environment and equip them the way that they should, that has made a significant difference. Now, if we just can bring our compensation, and we have to keep moving. This is a moving target. You know, 2016, 2017, what we were talking about doesn't really cut it now in the environment that we are in. But I think those are 2 things, and we have a strong culture that the people who come on board, they want to do public safety related tasks. And I'm very proud of our employees because they represent the agency well, they're very competent, and so I think the work environment, the physical work environment, and a competitive pay structure will make a huge difference and get us to the level that we need to be.
Okay, I appreciate your answering on it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here and talking to us. When the new, I don't know if you want to call it the KBI building, but the new building over on the Washburn campus was built, part of my understanding was that there was going to be a new forensics curriculum developed through Washburn University that would be, I guess for lack of a better, a partnership between them and the KBI lab. Are there any incentives to those students that go through that curriculum now to go to work for the KBI once they get their undergraduate or graduate degree? And if there are, what are those, and do we need to look at those again?
I would answer that in this way. It hasn't been as big a pipeline as I had hoped, but there definitely are people in that pipeline. And I think we brought one new one on. I probably should know this, but I think it was last week. We brought another Washburn graduate on to our laboratory staff. The advantage to us, the advantage to them is they can do their internships with us. If they like us, we like them. We have an open position. It's a pretty seamless path into the organization. And so that's been the biggest advantages of working with Washburn, plus the professional work environment that that new facility has created, sitting on an educational institution where, and Washburn has been very good to us. They let us participate in using their facilities as their students. We have a lot of adjunct professors within the laboratory that teach there. So it has been a very good relationship. I just wish it was a little bigger pipe of people coming in.
Can I ask a follow-up? Do you know how many students are going through that, whatever program that they're offering, like during a semester or a year? How many of those students are going through there and I guess doing internships or some kind of work over at that building as part of their curriculum? I was wondering if you knew that.
I should know that, Representative Weigel. I can't tell you off the top of my head. I do know that there is at least one internship available in each one of our disciplines, and there are 8 primary disciplines within the laboratory. So, you know, our hope would be that we would see a significant percentage of those 8 open positions or open intern positions available to us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So you think you have around 8 interns a semester? Can you find out for us?
That's what our plan is. I can't tell you off the top of my head
How many you're having?
how many we have.
Yeah, if you could find out, that's something I think certain members would be interested in knowing. Representative Poskin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is kind of a follow-up to Representative's question. So there are graduates, they're just not going to work for KBI? Like
Yes.
probably losing them to the,
I have never asked that question of Washburn, you know, where are the rest of them going? So I really can't answer that question either.
thank you.
All right, thanks for answering those questions. You can proceed.
Let me talk for a minute about the third package. This one is important to us also. Our professional staff is what makes the organization really work. If we have vacancies there, then somebody else has got to do it, and it's usually somebody who is in one of the higher paid classifications. It's not the most efficient way of doing things, but where as an organization, we own the special agent class, so changes that are made within the special agent class don't impact anybody else, any other agency for the most part. And when there are changes made in the forensic sciences class, same thing, doesn't have a direct impact really to other agencies. If we try to change the salary rate for the administrative support staff, for example, that could impact all kinds of positions all across the state. So we have been struggling because our personnel have heightened requirements for security through a pretty extensive background process. And somebody could go to work for, and I'm not picking on KDHE, but they could go to work for KDHE, then go make application, interview, and go to work the next day. For us, it takes about 2 months to get through this process. Most people are not willing for the same pay to go through that. They really have to have a desire to work for us and work in public safety, and some do. But that's not necessarily the norm. So what we did recently was did a survey of all of our professional staff and asked several questions. You know, what's different about this job than your prior job, and you know, those kinds of questions, so we could get a sense of what the difficulties were, if you will. And that survey was very compelling to me. It was, I'll leave it at it was very compelling. They talked about the process of going through that security clearance. They talked about the difficulties in dealing with the confidential information, the reading about and hearing about all the terrible things that people do to each other, and how stressful that was in comparison to other positions that they had had. So it truly is my belief that we need to separate and compensate them at least at some level, some kind of a different rate when they are willing to stand by us and get that required security clearance so that they can handle all the law enforcement sensitive and all the confidential information that our agency's full of. I mean, we really don't have much information in that building other than confidential and law enforcement sensitive material. And what we would ask for consideration of is a 10% differential because they go through that security process and allow us, instead of changing the security clearance process, that we could compensate them for that. Well, they've got to have it to work for us because everybody handles confidential or sensitive information. And some of it is very disturbing information that they have to work with. So that's a pretty straightforward. There's, I think, a lot of good reasons that we should do that, and I would just ask you to give some consideration to thinking about the impact that has on our ability to hire when, if somebody needs a job right now, they can't come to work for us. They've got to be able to stay in a position or not need to work for 2 to 2.5 months. So with that really summarizes, I think, the three different enhancement requests we are interested in pursuing. Just to give you a sense, we have a performance measure for our agency. If we need to stay at 5% or less as a vacancy rate with our current staff, to be able to do the base work that we are statutorily or by process required to do. In 2017, we had a 15% vacancy level. 2018, we had an 18% vacancy level. 2019, 17%, and 2020, 15%. So I guess what I'm trying to convey is we can't meet our performance standards. We can't meet our performance outcomes unless we're able to stay at least at that 5% level. And we have not been able to get there. So let me move on to a couple other points, and then I'll stand for any questions that you may have. The next thing I want to talk about is Forensic Science Center that we mentioned. The bonds on that Forensic Science Center are callable right now. And so we have two options to save some money, both for the organization and for the state. We can refinance, and I think our estimate on refinancing was, well, our debt service is about $4.3 million a year. So refinancing, we were hoping to save about $300,000 per year on interest costs. And the other option, of course, is just to pay off the bond. And that would be dropping the remaining principal balance of 41 million to zero. And so we are happy to go either direction. We've initiated some conversation with KDFA, ready to go whichever way think would be suitable, but kind of looking for some guidance, if you will, because I did sat through one hearing where there was a lot of discussion about retiring some of the big bond issues. I didn't sense a lot of interest in doing the smaller. And like ours, it's not associated with any other of these big bond issues. It's just one. And so that would be an easy one to pay off, I think. It's callable now. If we have existing dollars, that seems to be a way to go. But I don't want to launch off on something until I have really some indication of support and direction. So I'd ask you guys to consider that.
So one thing I would say is, one, it's probably more Director Profit's pay grade than mine, and Speaker Reichman and Chairman Waymaster's pay grade other than mine. You know, I personally am more in favor of making additional down payments on capers because it's a higher interest rate. But that's my personal opinion, and I think everybody has opinions. So, you know, I guess you can watch the process as it goes through, but I think capers is like a 7.75% cost of interest, and what'd you say this one was? But it can be refinanced down to probably 3.25%, 3.5%. We're hoping, I think.
I don't remember the estimate, but I do have a broad general estimate, and that's where we got the dollar amounts that
Right.
could possibly be saved.
So, for what it's worth.
Well, and we will continue to work with Division of Budget and, see what works the best. I just, I know there's a lot going on, and I don't want to launch off on something on my own and without really understanding that environment. So, let me talk for a minute about Arpa dollars. We have made an effort to apply for Arpa dollars to fill holes in our budget that we think are consistent with the purposes and the rationale behind ARPA. Right now, that's about $5.7 million in requests, and there would be a listing in our one of our addendums to the testimony, a listing of what it is that we are proposing for. Got too many papers here, but addendum 5 would say what it is that we are requesting, and those requests are proceeding. Of course, there's no decisions as of yet, but the reason I mentioned that is just wanted to let you know that we are trying to use whatever resources are available to move the agency forward, and we'll continue to do that and hope that we are successful with some of these ARPA requests.
Thank you very much. Questions for the director? I know we hit him with some of them as we were going through. No questions? All right, thank you very much. Director Profit, do you have any words of wisdom for us? So you've been sitting back there kind of being quiet.
Not usually any wisdom coming from me.
Well, I mean, we're always interested in your insights to anything. If you have anything you'd like to bring forward, we appreciate your work on the budget. I know we hit it hard for about a 3-month period here, but you live it.
I do. Thank you, Chairman Francis. Adam Profit, Director of the Budget. I would just echo Director Thompson's comments on the pay plan, just to give a little context to that about why the governor might not have recommended it initially. The hope was to, when the pay plan first came into the budget submission, the governor wants to ensure that it is specifically tailored to the needs of KBI. She's certainly supportive of making a change there and ensuring that we have the proper pay. She just felt that the initial pay plan might not have achieved that goal. So our charge back to Director Thompson and the team was, we're at your disposal. We're available to be resourced to Division of Budget or Department of Administration, OPS. Use us as you need, and let's make something that is more targeted towards the agency and achieves the need that you have there. So that's why it's coming to you at this point in time. To be perfectly honest, I haven't had a chance to run it past my boss just yet, but I'll be doing that in the near future, and we're still in contact with Director Thompson and team to see where that's going to land.
And just my boss, by the way, is different than his boss, but, we recently just pulled a pay progression plan out of the budget in appropriations to be considered when we look at the governor's 5% across the board wage increase. So, I mean, we can make recommendations underneath that, but in reality, after what I saw today, that's probably what's going to happen. It'll be pulled out, and then when we look at the 5% across the board deal, they'll look at all of those at that time. So, and of course, we can pass whatever we want out of here, but that's probably the reality in approps, so. Yep, thank you. Okay, anything else? All right, tomorrow we're going to do recommendations on KBI, C-Post, Adjutant General from yesterday, and Sentencing Commission. And then on Thursday, we'll have the budget hearing for Department of Corrections. So if there's nothing else for the committee, we're adjourned.